Hi, I'm Dave Edwards, and this is Leadership Plus. Ever since I started doing my work as an executive coach and a consultant, I've been meeting and talking with a lot of people. And some of the questions that I'm asked seem to come up over and over again, not only in my one-on-one meetings with folks, but even in emails that I receive. And I do enjoy hearing from anyone who has ideas or thoughts about management and leadership issues. But what I thought I would do today is answer some of the most common questions that I get. So I've made a list, and I'm just going to hit on a couple of these. And if you have any other questions for me, please email me at daveedwards@outlook.com. So the first question that I get fairly often is I get bogged down in email. What should I do? Well, this is really a very common question and a very big problem for a lot of people because email is now the preferred method of communications for a lot of people. One of the reasons why it's so popular is because we expect a very quick response. I mean, I remember back in the day when you would send a letter to someone if you had a question or a comment that required more than a quick telephone conversation. Let's say you had a proposal to send to somebody. You would send it via the snail mail, and then you would wait a week or more for you to get a response. You might make a phone call, but there was no guarantee that the person would pick up right away. But with email, I think it's because we were so enamored with the technology when it first became available. We sort of expected we would send a response and we would get almost an instant reply. And as a result, we've trained people to believe that we're always available to them. And I don't think that's a very effective way of doing our work. For example, it distracts us from the important things that we have to do. And that's why I always encourage people to check email 2-3 times a day and prioritize the responses so that the most important messages that you get, let's say from your boss or an important client, get your immediate attention. Some of the other emails can wait till later in the day, and some can just be filed. I do believe that it's wise to carve out a little time in your workday to respond to emails thoughtfully. And so that's just a question of how you can fit that into your schedule. But I really believe that if we give the impression that we're always available, 24/7 via email, that almost increases the chances that people will expect a very quick response from us. And while that's great for them, it's probably not great for our own productivity. Here's another question I got recently. Someone wrote, Dave, you have written about how we should not be a micromanaging boss. But what happens if we have a micromanaging boss? Great question. It is not a good idea to be a micromanager, but that doesn't mean that everyone buys into that philosophy. Sometimes we see people who, they just want to stay in touch. They just don't understand what their place is as a leader and a manager. And so they want to almost do the job through you. And that's why it's not a good idea to be a micromanager. And I have written about ways to avoid doing that. But if your boss is a micromanager, now that's a very different situation. But I would suggest a couple of things if that is the situation you face. First of all, is your boss just micromanaging you, or is that your boss's tendency for everyone? If it's their tendency for everyone, that's a much more difficult problem because you're not in a position to tell your boss how to go about their life, although you can drop little hints like, hey, you don't have to check on me. I've got this under control. You can drop little hints like that. But if, on the other hand, you believe that you are the only person in the office that your boss is micromanaging, that's a much different situation. And there is something you can do about it. It's kind of a messy solution because it does involve you talking to your boss. And what you have to find out is why your boss is doing that. And so you can just ask him or her, hey, I've noticed that you're kind of micromanaging all of my projects. Do you just not trust me, or is there something else going on that I need to know? Just asking that basic question, not in a threatening or snotty kind of way, can really help the problem, because maybe your boss doesn't even realize he or she is doing it. But maybe there is a reason. Maybe your boss believes that you don't have the experience to carry on the project by yourself. And maybe your boss just assigned it to you to give you a little exposure, but your boss still wants to make sure it gets done correctly. That's a different situation, because that might mean that you're being micromanaged for the short term, and eventually the leash will be loosened. But it's good to know what's going on in the mind of your boss. Here's another question. Someone writes, I don't like to tell a lot of people this, but I feel I can tell you, I just don't feel like I am as productive now that I am working from home. What should I do? Well, in the early stages following COVID-19 and people started working from home, it was really kind of a novelty. And I don't think any of us really expected it would go on this long. But the truth is that many of us are working from home and not back in the office. And if you feel that you're not quite as productive at home as you were in the office, there are some things you can do. First of all, think about your workspace. Is it isolated enough from everything that goes on in your house? I mean, if you have to have your workspace at the kitchen table, well, you're going to be distracted by that refrigerator who's going to call you, or you may be distracted if you're in the living room by the TV because, Netflix is calling. You need to sort of remove yourself from all of that. So if you can isolate yourself from distractions, that would be the ideal situation. If you're having problems, set aside not only workspace, but work time. Agree to a work schedule that you're going to basically not run errands. You're not going to do anything else from, let's say, 8 in the morning until 11 o'clock. At 11 o'clock, you're going to give yourself a break to maybe do a little exercise, eat a little lunch, go for a walk, whatever that might be. But then at 1 o'clock, you're going to get back to work. Now, maybe for you, the daytime schedule isn't the ideal one. Maybe you want to work from 9 until noon and then, not have regular work hours, but get back to work at 6 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night. I mean, if it's okay with your boss and if it helps you be more productive, try it. The other thing I always suggest is, get out of your jammies. I mean, you don't have to necessarily put on a suit and a tie and for women, high heels. But you know what? It doesn't hurt to just dress up a little bit. It kind of gets you into the frame of mind of being at work. Here's another question that I get. I've been working with a lot of people who are looking for new jobs. As I think you may know, I created a course on helping people find jobs. And one of the things that I'm doing in some of my executive coaching is helping people one-on-one with writing a great cover letter, refining the resume, but even more importantly, preparing for that first job interview. We take a look at some of the more common questions that are asked in job interviews, and I try to help people prepare their responses based on some of the research that I found as to what employers are looking to hear. Well, here's a question that I got from someone who says, what do you think will be the most important question that I'll be asked during a job interview? Well, there are some kind of typical questions that you might be asked, but I think one question that some people consider to be a throwaway question is a really important question. They might ask something like, why do you want to come work for us? Or what about this job excites you? However that question is phrased, what they're really waiting to see or hear from you is how you sell yourself. And I think it's very important for any job candidate to have what I call an elevator speech. A 30-second, 45-second, maybe a minute response as to why you're interested in the job. You want to be able to show enthusiasm for the job and maybe a little vision. So if you're applying, let's say, for a manager's job at a nonprofit or an executive director position, do enough research about that organization where you can speak about what's your vision. I mean, what are the opportunities? What are the threats for organizations in that line of work? And be able to express that in your elevator speech. Think about political candidates. Political candidates on the stump have a stump speech, and they repeat it over and over and over again. Now they'll vary it. If you're in Milwaukee, they may insert something about a local sports team, or if you're on the West Coast, they might do something about the weather. You can modify your stump speech or your elevator speech, but have the basic framework of what you want to say and what you want to convey to a future employer in your head ahead of time, and rehearse it enough so it becomes just natural and it just rolls off your tongue. But you want to make sure that you show enthusiasm and that you show that you've been thinking enough, that you have a vision for how you could help the organization and how you could take it to the next step. So those are some of the most frequently asked questions that I get, and I'd love to hear from you. If you have questions for me about management, leadership, or anything related, please send me an email to daveedwards@outlook.com, or you can go to my website and you can fill out the form on the website, and it'll get to me as well. And I'll try to answer your question in a future edition of Leadership Plus. Hey, thanks very much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button. Please consider subscribing. I try to post things about on a weekly basis, things that might help you in dealing with future management and leadership issues. This has been Leadership Plus. I'm Dave Edwards. We'll talk soon.